All right. Well, I hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving. And I'm going to go over some notes with you today, a bell ringer, and that's about it today. And then there's a video on women's role during World War One. So that's the plan. We're going to talk about women's role during World War One, and that's about it for today. Okay, just a reminder: your presentations for your World War One battles projects are due Friday. There will be no lesson for Friday. Just please submit your slides. If you please record your slides also. So if you have to present your slides, you have to read off your slides and record yourself reading your slides. You do not have to be in the video. Don't worry about that. There's a lot of times when I did this with my friends, I just did a Zoom chat and we kind of read through it together, and that's how we would record our voices while we're presenting some information. So if you want to do that, please do that. That would be the best, because I need a recording of you talking about your presentation, so I know you did it, obviously. So that being said, make sure you have that done for Friday. Again, there's going to be no assignment for Friday. It's just those presentations need to be turned in for that day. I will put up an assignment for Friday, presentations. You can submit that ASAP if you would like. Okay, that would be great. But again, that's for Friday. For today, bell ringer: detail why President Wilson thought the Espionage and Sedition Acts were justified during America's entry of World War One. So we finished off talking about the Espionage and Sedition Acts and why the United States thought that this was important. So I'll give you some time to work on that. If you want to, please pause it, because I'm just going to keep rolling through it. So pause this now so you can work on it, and then I'll describe it, obviously, afterwards. All right, that's good enough. So detail why President Wilson thought the Espionage and Sedition Acts were justified during America's entry of World War One. Really, there's immigrant groups, right, from Germany, from Great Britain, in the United States. So President Wilson was a little eerie about joining the war because of one group in the U.S. might have an issue with it. There might be violent protests, there might be rebellions all throughout the United States if we join one particular side. So that was one of the biggest issues why we stayed out of it for so long. And then you have the sinking of Lusitania. Then you have the Zimmerman note, right? And that was very disheartening to many Americans and created an enemy out of Germany. Again, there's a lot of theories of maybe it was just Great Britain trying to push the United States onto their side, on the Allied forces. But who knows, right? So with that Zimmerman note, with the sinking of Lusitania, Germany was a clear enemy. All right. And to try to control any type of, I guess you could say, any type of rebellions or protests in the U.S., the United States passed the Espionage and Sedition Acts. So if you're talking badly against your own country during a time of war, if you were trying to, let's just say, if you were trying to, promote the enemy, Germany, during that time of war, then you could be seen thrown in jail, right? $10,000. There's many instances where we try to rid German culture and heritage out of the United States. Culture, right? German-speaking classes gone, out of education. German books out. Any type of German, any person has an occupation of German heritage, they're reviewed and really picked out in the culture to make sure that this person isn't trying to start an uprising in the U.S. So they lost their jobs. Many times they were killed, lynched out in the middle of the streets to make an example of these German Americans, right? And to try to think that maybe they would start this uprising. Who knows? There's a strong fear in the U.S. because of this. And with these two acts, again, they're trying to limit the freedom of speech expression for these people of Germany, because this is the first time in United States history that we're at war with a European country across the Atlantic Ocean, where we have all these immigrant groups in the United States where if we go to war, there might be some sort of uprising, or the war might happen in the United States, right? That was one of the best advantages of the U.S., that we're far separated from these European countries, that we don't have to get involved. But this is a big fear, right? There might be German spies and sympathizers here in the U.S. that might cause this uproar. So President Wilson thought these two acts were appropriate during the time the United States got involved. After the war, they're repealed, they're taken out. And I know we talked about Liberty cabbage, right? The sauerkraut, how they changed it to Liberty cabbage, and there's many other instances like propaganda being created to try to persuade the masses of the United States that, hey, this is our clear enemy. We need to watch what we say because you never know if there's a German spy, so on and so forth. So those are the reasons for the Espionage and Sedition Acts, and with America's entry into World War One. All right, with vocab, let me pull that up real quick, see if there's any terms that we need to go over, because we should have a quiz here soon. I'm thinking towards maybe Thursday we'll have a quiz, I'm thinking. It won't be hard, it's just on vocab, and there might be 2 short answers afterwards, but other than that, that's about it. Let me see if we have any terms that we need to go over. We didn't discuss yet. Okay, so we went over that. All right, Zimmerman note, Lusitania, we already know that. Okay, we'll go over some tomorrow. Okay. And how about actually the beginning of next week we'll have a quiz on vocab, because that's coming towards an end and the unit's coming towards an end, and I want to make sure we get that quiz in as well. So no vocab terms today. Let me just go over this real quick with you guys, and then I'll have you watch the video that with the attachment for today, and that'll be it. So here we go, slideshow. All right, so we finished up talking about the Espionage Sedition Act, like I just mentioned, with the bell ringer. I know we had a bell ringer on it on Wednesday, I believe, but again, this is 5 days ago, so I want to make sure that we reviewed it before we moved on. All right, so women in war. So when we talk about World War II, when we get there, we talk about Rosie the Riveter. That's a person in U.S. propaganda that really tried to promote women's role in society during a time of warfare. But we often forget with World War I what women's roles were in business and the economy, right? In industries, to try to help prepare for the war effort. In many cases, with healthcare, with nursing during the war, to try to help these soldiers, get back on their feet. And there's many cases with women actually going out into farms and growing crops and food supplies for the men fighting overseas. So women's role really increased during this time. And I know we mentioned about in the progressive era, women, how they changed, right, from just the head of the household, where they would just take care of the family and grow crops, things like that. In the progressive era, they're moving towards these clerk jobs, these secretary jobs, librarians, you name it. And actually, the progressive era still overlaps during this time with World War One, and we don't really see the advancements of women in society, especially with the right to vote. That's a big one, and their role in businesses and industry, and giving the opportunity of education until World War One. So unfortunately, we don't really see advancements of minority groups, things like that, until we actually have a world conflict, which is surprising to say the least. But hey, it happened, right? So women filled jobs vacated by men in war. They worked in factories, on railroads, and started American Red Cross. That's a big one. And women convinced President Wilson and Congress to pass the 19th Amendment because of their roles during World War I. So yeah, we needed people to create war supplies, ammunition, different types of weaponry, many different supplies for men as they're fighting over in World War I. So it was important that women filled these roles to help the United States win this war. And many believe the home front, how the United States is this strong industrial power. We were the strongest industrial power at this time. That's what really won us the war, the Allied powers to win the war over the Central powers, over Germany. Because let's face it, in the United States, we weren't targeted, right? None of our industries or factories or businesses were destroyed because of the war. We were far separated because of the Atlantic Ocean. So with that, these European countries were all dependent on the U.S. for supplies and armaments. And this will continue after the war with the Roaring '20s as Europe needs to rebuild. So they are dependent on what the U.S. makes and creates to try to rebuild their economies, to try to rebuild their cities and their areas that were destroyed and affected by World War I. So women's role in society definitely one of the biggest primary reasons why we won this war. Our industrial power, how we could just continue to push out war supplies and armaments while these other countries could not do it. Simply, they couldn't, because the war affected them too much in Europe. and we were untouched in the United States, and that was a big help to the women. American Red Cross is a big thing that was created during World War I, especially with these men that were coming off the battlefield. Still, here and there, you'll see women on the battlefield, not too much, but mostly as nurses, as people that will help aid these soldiers coming off the battlefield in World War I, try to help them get back on their feet and get back to fighting. And after the war, we'll see a lot of these positions being created for women to help these men with post-traumatic stress, dealing with some of the causes and issues of World War I. Not nearly as much as what we'll see when we get to World War II, but in any case, this is the first time we see women actually just gaining that support and pushing that support on the battlefield during World War I. Okay. World War II, like I said, will get a little bit more involved, and you don't really hear about it too much, but World War I actually, you see the women filling these spots and gaining these rights, and pushing for pushing for equality in America for these women. And with the 19th Amendment, that will be surely passed right after World War I happens because of women's role in society during that time. All right, last thing I want to go over is U.S. soldiers were unknown to Europeans because they had no idea what type of fighting they were introduced with. Obviously, we know what the Spanish-American War was a big thing, okay, and these U.S. soldiers had no idea the type of fighting that was going on with trench warfare. And we all know the Spanish-American War being that splendid little war, right? We know it as just something that was, it ended in 6 months, and we really had we had some casualties, not many at all, compared to, let's say with World War I, World War II, the Civil War, obviously. So men during this time had no idea what fighting was like, and I mentioned before they thought it was like a game in a way. But they're called doughboys for a reason, I guess you could say, is because this nickname, I know we went over with the trivia, during the Mexican War, Mexican-American War, when they were walking through the desert, a lot of this desert air and the dirt would pick up and just be plastered on the men's faces, and it would just look like they're making dough. Look like they're like I guess you could say in a pizza shop, right? Cody Craybill, where the flour looked like flour on their faces. So they called them doughboys. That's why. It just came from the Mexican-American War. But again, American soldiers, right? They weren't prepared for this type of fighting. Okay, they're going in at gung-ho. They're really optimistic about it. They're going to show the rest of the world what type of fighting they have. But that changes really quick, and we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Again, they weren't prepared for this war. They thought it was a game, and they just go over and do their best to try to push back Germany and the Central Powers. And this is what a doughboy would look like. The Pillsbury Doughboy, right? No, I'm just kidding. But here's his outfit, right? And, he's prepared for war, obviously. This heavy, thick jacket supposed to prevent any type of bullet from coming through it. Yeah, right. That would just rip right through him. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like he's really prepared for this type of fighting with the different mustard gas, right? He doesn't even have a gas mask on. Eventually, when they get prepared for it and see what's going on, they'll get gas masks. But, yeah, there's nothing really too impressive about this outfit, this wardrobe. I mean, it looks like he's going camping or something. That's not going to help him in war. Yeah, well, again, we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But I think that's a unique fact with the Doughboys, how they got that name, and why American soldiers were called Doughboys. Well, there you go. The most important takeaway for today is women's role in World War I, how the Red Cross was created, filling nursing jobs, right, helping these soldiers off the battlefield, filling positions in factories and industries to help support the war effort, creating supplies and armaments. And really in World War I and World War II, the United States is really well known for their industrial power and how they can create so many supplies and armaments because we're not affected by this war at all. Okay, we don't see the damages, the destruction like these European countries do. And we can thank, obviously, the Atlantic Ocean and then World War II, Pacific Ocean, for that reasoning. And the women's role in society really was increased to help this war effort. And that's what really pushed the 19th Amendment. That's what really pushed progressive movements for women, their rights in the workplace and education. Unfortunately, it comes to World War I in order for those rights to happen, but it is what it is. It is what it is. There you have it. All right, so please check out the video that I'm going to attach as well. It's an interesting video. It talks about women's role a little bit more in detail during World War One, but I'll post that to the assignment. So check that out, and you guys have a good day. Have a good one.